Welcome to another edition of Suffolk Matters, where Suffolk County meets the men and women of Suffolk AME. News and views you can't hear anywhere else. And before we meet this week's guest, here's a quick reminder. AME's May Day Music Festival is coming up on May 11th. Join us for live national and local bands, vendors, food and beer, fun for all ages. Get tickets at maydaymusicfestival.com. Kids under 12 are free. So this morning our guest is Kevin Peterman, president of the Faculty Association of Suffolk Community College. Good morning, Kevin.
Good morning.
So let's talk a little bit about the Faculty Association. You know, what is it that your members do?
Okay, the Faculty Association represents all the full and part-time faculty at Suffolk Community College's 3 campuses. We represent about 475 full-time members, and this semester about 1,350 part-time or adjunct members. Our membership includes classroom faculty, counselors, librarians, some of the technical people, the lab support, the technology group.
Okay, great. So AME also has some membership over at the college as well. We've had the chance to work together on a bunch of different things. But, it basically puts us in the same boat in a sense that we're all public workers. Mm-hmm. And it's something I've heard you say before, and I'd like you to expand upon maybe a little bit, talking about the unsung heroes.
Well, one of the things that happens at the college is it runs so well, and we're the largest community college in the state of New York.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of success stories. And it's only possible because of the group that works at the college. And it's not just my bargaining unit, it's yours as well.
Right.
And there's one other group that represents the administrators. One of the things that frustrates me is that we're probably the best kept secret on Long Island, because we have such a diverse group of students, from traditional 18-year-olds to what we call non-traditional, single head of household sometimes. And for many of our students, they're the first generation that is going to school, going to college.
Right.
And it's really quite amazing when you go to commencement and you see these students get up there and basically thank their family for sacrificing and things like that.
Right.
And we really do give students a real opportunity.
Yeah, so it's an amazing college in a sense, because you have to accommodate all of this diversity, when you're talking about the typical things you would think about, which is, a gender or ethnicity, but now you're also talking about an age gap. And in that age gap, when you're talking heads of households, they've got to remain gainfully employed and still attend college. And so, your membership in conjunction with everybody at the college really has to come up with very creative ways to make this possible. And it is something that's very unique to Suffolk Community College.
Well, one of the things that we do, we offer classes at 6:30 in the morning, and we have classes running until 10 o'clock at night, and we actually have classes 7 days a week. So we really try and accommodate every type of student, if you will.
Right.
And we have those returning students that are really anxious because they may not know social media or they haven't been in school for 20 years.
Right.
And it's just interesting to see the generations kind of work together and, that anxiety that they might have, but after a few weeks, they're
they get acclimated.
Yeah.
They get used to the flow.
Right.
Sure, yeah. So you are the president of the Faculty Association.
That is correct.
So what inspired you initially just to run for office?
That's a good question. Just because I just saw, many years ago. I mean, I've been at the college for 42 years, and I've been involved with the union for almost 40.
Right.
I was at one of the campuses, and they needed someone to be a rep, and I just said, I'll do it.
Right.
And it's something I never thought I'd do. Never thought I'd ever be president, but it's something that really has taught me a lot. I've got to experience things I've never thought that I would. And probably the best thing about the job and the reason that I've been there so long is it's just so rewarding to see how you can turn lives around.
Yeah, I agree with you there. It is a job with long hours and a lot of difficult, let's call them discussions.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But it is very, very rewarding to see that you're able to make a positive impact in someone's life. And when you make a positive impact in someone's working life, they go on to make positive impacts in people's lives through the education process. So I definitely hear you on that one. So, what are some of the big issues that you've been facing?
Well, the biggest issue is funding. The community college, the state law when they established community colleges, basically said that funding should be 1/3 from the students, 1/3 from the local sponsor, which in our case is Suffolk County,
Right.
and 1/3 from the state of New York. But there was also a clause in there that said if you're open access, which means you'll let any student in that's qualified,
Right.
that the state would provide 40% of the funding.
Right.
Unfortunately, every year when they pass the state budget, they do something called notwithstanding.
Right.
And what the state has actually been giving the college over the last number of years is about 26%
Right.
of the funding. And what happens is the money has to come from somewhere. So unfortunately, the students are paying about 50% of the cost.
Right. And by design, it was really supposed to be more of an equal split. And that I guess brings us back to a favorite topic here on Suffolk Matters, which is unfunded mandates. So you have to provide this service, but you also have to figure out where you're going to acquire the funding to provide this service, and that becomes difficult for everyone. The people trying to provide the service and the people trying to receive the service. So.
We are relying more on trying to do more grants, if you will.
Sure.
But one of the things that I think I found to be very enlightening for me is several years ago we started to involve some of the students when we do our what we call advocacy.
Right.
I don't use the word lobby. I use advocacy and educate.
Yes.
And February we bring students up to Albany and have them tell their story. And I tell the students that this is a unique opportunity for you because you're going up to Albany, you're going to be in the legislative building, and you're going to be walking into offices of our representatives and telling them, about your experience at Suffolk. And one thing I do realize is that the elected officials really like, they see Kevin, they know Kevin.
Yes.
They see a student and they hear the story firsthand
Right.
about how they were working two jobs. And going to school and
Right.
things like that. So that to me has been something that I felt has been very educational for everyone.
Sure. Yeah, I don't think elected would expect you to come in and they say, "How are you?" and you say everything's fine, and we have no issues. So in a way, there's almost that built-in expectation when you're doing your advocacy work, but bringing in real people with real issues, I find that resonates also. We had just done a lobby day up in Albany, and we brought about 100 of our members up there and, walked from office to office. And we had a number of people come down and speak to us. We had a gathering area, and, the elected officials came down, with the comptroller and the majority leader from the Senate, to name a few. And they really as much as they're okay with seeing me, let's say they're okay with seeing me, they really like meeting the individuals and hearing those individual stories. So that's, I agree that that's a good move. So, I guess maybe just getting back to, the funding issue. Something we think about because we share membership on those campuses as well. When there's an increase in the tuition rate for the students to try and fill that gap, do you feel like that's maybe like a double-edged sword?
Yes, many of our students do get financial aid, but the other problem that we have is the high school graduating classes are shrinking.
Right.
So there aren't as many students graduating. Probably about 8 to 10 years ago, we were getting about 18% of the high school graduates.
Right.
Now we're getting about 24%. I think the reason for that is the cost of education.
Sure.
And what I tell many students is you can come to Suffolk, or if you're in Nassau County, go to Nassau and spend $5,000 a year for tuition.
Right.
Save some money, and then transfer. To another institution.
Right.
I don't know if you've seen them. We've had ads. They've been award winning where you have a student that says, "I started at Suffolk and I went to such and such."
Absolutely.
And certainly it's something that I think people should realize that the high cost of education and the student debt issue, which is the national problem.
Right.
I think community colleges can really help with students.
No,
with that.
it's an excellent solution. If you're considering higher education and there are certain credits that you're going to have to achieve no matter what school you go to. if you can find an equitable solution to getting those credits and then move into your specialty, in a different location, overall, that's going to be a positive for the individual. And, carrying all the student loan debt, and the very difficult process of trying to either pay that off or find some way to maybe get out of it, which is, as you know, damn near impossible. So it is a very smart choice, and it is a very good message that you guys are putting out there to let people know. People go on to do great things with their lives, regardless of where that first piece of higher education comes from. So, speaking of, providing higher education, something that I've been looking at, and something I'm sure you're aware of as well, another national trend in a sense, which is the move away from full-time educators and moving into this what we call the adjunct model. And some of the difficulty with that is not knowing whether or not you have, as an educator, you're going to have a job at the end of the semester. You do your adjunct work for that semester and then hope you get rehired. So that whole idea of stability and,
There's a national trend, unfortunately, and I don't want to get too negative, but underfunding higher education.
Right.
It's just something that's been going on. If you look at statistics over the years, the amount of money that the states have poured in to public higher education has gone down.
Right.
And probably in the late 70s, we might have had 300 adjuncts.
Right.
Okay. And when money gets tight, you don't replace full-timers and you hire part-timers.
Right.
So, like as I said before, now we have 1,350 part-time adjuncts. And then we have a very diverse group of adjuncts. Some of them are working, trying to get a full-time job in higher education.
Sure.
Many of them, because we have Stony Brook right up the road from our Selden campus,
Right.
are working on their PhDs, and they teach a course or two at Suffolk while they're working on their PhD.
Right.
We also have high school teachers that want to teach at a college, so they teach at night. We have professionals, whether they're judges or accountants, that are adjuncts. They're not looking to get a full-time job.
Right.
We have retirees that are teaching.
Yeah.
So our adjunct pool, if you will, is diverse.
Right.
But it is a problem when we don't fund it.
Double-edged sword, right? Yeah. So and people want to get the best education. So you talk about having the ability to go to a community college and save money to get those credits that you need, but you still want to know that you've got access to the best resources, so that your education carries over to the next.
One of the things that I think has been very helpful over the last number of years, the college has been very successful in what we call capital projects.
Okay.
And what that means is that when we build a new building,
Right.
the way it works is half the money comes from the state of New York and the other half comes from the county.
Right.
So that's been helpful because we've built some new state-of-the-art buildings, which I think has helped attract students, because the Brentwood campus, is part of the Pilgrim State property. In
Right,
1974,
right. Yeah.
when it opened, I mean, there were Pilgrim State buildings, and over the years, that campus has built a field house. The police academy is on the campus. We just opened up a new library, except we don't call them libraries anymore. They're learning resource centers.
Right.
And it's a state-of-the-art facility. And I think those are the things that I think people say, wait a minute, this institution has some really fine
Right.
things to offer. We have a new science building that we opened 2 years ago at the Ammerman campus at Selden. And we actually named it after former legislator Bill Lindsay.
Yeah.
Because the
That's
county.
a great facility.
It's a great facility. And the county was helpful in supporting us.
Right.
Just this semester, we opened up a new health and wellness building in the Riverhead campus.
Right.
And the East End is thrilled because the facility has a pool, and not only will it be used by students, but it'll be used by outside groups, including fire departments, so they can train. There'll be a facility to train lifeguards. So
Right.
again, the community college. We're not just dealing with
Right.
the students, we're dealing with the community as well.
Right, right. And so I would imagine to some extent that advocacy work that you mentioned earlier, that would kind of put you squarely behind something like this also, going around and making sure everybody understands not just the needs of your members, but the needs of the college as a whole in order to provide, again, not just to your members, not just to the students, but back to the community.
And again, that's what I think has been helpful when we did our advocacy work. We did get elected officials to come on campus and to see the need,
Right.
and to get their support. It's not easy to say we're gonna build a $38 million new library.
Right.
It's great. We needed it, and the students. It's just a phenomenal building.
Great.
It's totally wired. Every study carrel, every room has a USB port and a plug, so they stay connected. The campus is wireless, and when I walk around the library, I say, "This is your building."
It's good.
And it's just something that, you know, just makes you feel good that you were able to accomplish those things.
Right. Yeah. And again, good for the students, good for the faculty, good for the community. That's all great work. So speaking of community and inclusiveness, as you know, AME is working on a festival, a May Day Music Festival, and the idea was from the initial inception, people get to hear about the labor movement generally in negative terms. You see articles in the paper when there's conflict, something going on that needs to be resolved, and there tends to be some anger or tension around it, whatever. But there is so much that goes on inside of labor, from the top down, every day, somebody helping somebody, doing a little something more than just their job. And we wanted to open the doors to the public, the community as a whole, and say, come on in and see what labor is about. So we join with AFL-CIO, groups like yours, in trying to get this thing off the ground. And it's been tremendous so far. I mean, we've got a lot of really great support, national acts, local acts, artisan food trucks, local craft beer, an area for kids with their own music, which I think is going to be great. But just in general, this festival I think was a good idea in opening the doors to the labor world to everyone else. We want to thank you for your involvement.
Oh, you're certainly welcome. I think it's a brilliant idea, and I hope it continues. I hope it becomes an annual event. When we were approached, I mean, I'm on the board of the Long Island Federation of Labor. Sure. And when that was discussed, it was the first thing I said. I went back to my board and said, we have to support this. So we're looking forward to it. And I just think we need to educate the public about what the unsung heroes, if you will, of labor, the amount of sacrifices that many of our people make. I'm sure you have many of your employees that are volunteers. Many of my faculty do tremendous community service.
Sure.
And it's something I think the public needs to hear.
Yeah, and that was, that was an important part at the inception of this whole thing. And you talk about volunteerism and community engagement. We wanted to make this as affordable as possible for everyone. We set the rate for children under 12 to $0. Ticket prices for everyone else at $35. So this is not a for-profit event, so to speak, but we will peel off proceeds. And one of the groups that's going to is going to be the Harry Chapin Food Bank, Long Island Cares, making sure that children who don't have access to food as often as they should, and that's because of complications outside of their control. Mm-hmm. And a lot of these kids, they get their very best meal during the school year while they're at, actually at class, the K-12 range. And in the summertime, what do? So, one of the many programs that they have is identifying these kids who have that need and collecting and delivering food to them so that they can, continue to have a childhood, Yeah,
I certainly understand that. Whether you realize it or not, we actually have a food pantry on each of our campuses. Some of our students actually, at Thanksgiving, our union actually donates money to each food pantry to help some of the students with their needs.
Yeah, it's a bigger problem on Long Island than it should be, and just one of the reasons why community colleges are so great is because they offer access for people who are trying to maybe escape that type of circumstance and make sure that their children never have to deal with that type of circumstance. And that's that. I think again, the beauty of the labor movement. You know, we don't just look at ourselves. We consider, you know, the community at large, and we make sure that when, you know, new construction projects happen, that people are paid fairly, so that they have the money to spend to put back into the community. When you have, you know, outside companies come in from another state, pay their employees not so great, take all the profits out of state, you know, you end up defunding the area. You end up, you know, causing a little bit of economic depression. And if that keeps building and building and building, you do actually end up with, you know, recessionary kind of situations. So,
Well, fortunately for the college, I mentioned all the buildings that we were building over the last number of years. That was all done with union labor.
Union labor,
The College Board of Trustees, who are volunteers, have made it their commitment to have project labor agreements for our construction projects.
very important.
And honestly, I believe that's helped us when we advocated for new buildings. We also pointed out to our brothers and sisters in the trades that this
Right.
would be work for them.
Yeah, and it is very important. This is the kind of forethought that goes into when the labor movement tries to do things, because you know we live here, we pay taxes here, we are your neighbors, your friends, your family, and we care about you also. You know, in some senses. There have been times where people have tried to cast it as an us against them kind of mentality. You know, represented workers in a labor union and those that are not. But that's not really what labor unions do. We try to raise the standards for all workers.
Well, labor unions are the reason I really do believe this is why we have a middle class.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong.
And I think we're fortunate, and this is just my own opinion, but
Yeah.
in New York, we do have a very strong organized labor force in the state,
Yeah.
which I think has been helpful to us.
Sure.
We've had some faculty members that we've hired from out of state. There's one individual at one of the campuses was at a southern state, and when he came here and he saw he was in a union,
Right.
he was so thrilled. He
Right.
said, "You have no idea what it was like at the other institution." He's a great commercial for me, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's, you know, I mean, that's almost the way it is in some of these other states. You know, they call it right to work, and it's such a disingenuous phrase because really it's right to work for less, because it ends up becoming a race to the bottom. What they try to do is weaken the power of the unions, and when the power of the unions are weakened, they begin chipping away at the workforce. It's the easiest way to help their bottom line. You know, if we can just pay people less money, if we can make them work longer hours, if we can force more productivity, if we can cut back on these health and safety measures, you know, maybe someone will get injured, maybe someone won't. But at the end of the day, we've got to protect our bottom line and our, you know, stakeholders and our shareholders or whatever else. And it ends up being bad for everyone. And, you know, you look at, you know, certain corporations, they move into a town and they set up this big store and it's got all the very best things and the prices are very low. That ends up starving out all the mom and pop shops. And then the only place you can afford to get anything and you can actually get anything is through them. It's a way for big money to make sure that the money only flows in their direction. And it's very, very prominent in those quote-unquote right-to-work states. So, yeah, I don't know. I rant from time to time. These are things that actually, you know, they agitate me a little bit.
I understand. I
and,
understand.
And I want people to, you know, obviously everybody's got to make their own choice, but I want them to be able to hear the other side of the discussion. Not everybody is willing to believe the line that's fed to them by the people with the most resources in terms of money and access to communication. That's why a show like this was very important to us also, is just to be able to get the labor movement's message out into the world rather than having someone else maybe with a different vested interest trying to communicate with people. So Kevin, you don't just work in Suffolk County, and you're not just involved on the community college campuses. Obviously, you work with Long Island Federation of Labor, AFL-CIO, and that's here on Long Island. But you do more.
Yes, I do. I'm on the executive board of the Long Island Fed, as you mentioned, but our local is affiliated with New York State United Teachers. They mostly represent K through 12 and some hospital workers, but
Right.
there are a number of higher ed institutions in the state that are affiliated with our state federation, which is New York State United Teachers.
Right.
I am a member of their board. I represent the community colleges around the state.
Okay.
So I get to travel around the state to represent and advocate for community colleges. Our national affiliate is the American Federation of Teachers,
Right.
and I'm on their Program and Policy Council for Higher Education, and we meet 4 or 5 times a year to deal with national issues
Right.
with higher education.
Sure, and that's I would imagine it's a tremendous resource. You know, for the state of New York, obviously, dealing with the federal issues and then dealing with the state issues, and being able to bring that stuff back to Suffolk County, show what works best in Suffolk County to the people in the state of New York, and find out what's going on in the state of New York that Suffolk County can benefit from.
Yes, and it's we actually have a community college conference every year in October for the state
Right.
community colleges, and we have 2 days of workshops and working together and sharing best practices, if
Right.
you will, and even meeting with college presidents
Right.
at that event. The union leaders, presidents, meeting with college presidents
Right.
to talk about how to work together,
Sure.
which is something I'm very proud of, to have a working relationship with the administration of the college, and to show other institutions that by working together we can achieve so much more. And I think that
Right.
we've done that pretty effectively.
Yeah, you know, and that's another thing I think, you know, that maybe comes to people's minds when you talk about the labor movement. You know, working conditions were so bad decades and decades ago that, you know, people had to take to the streets, and thousands of people walking out of work, and, you know, these loud, you know, maybe, you know, obtrusive protests and everything else. But a lot can be done today, in this day and age, by sitting down and saying there's a legitimate problem here. Here is how I see it. You know, tell me what your issues are, and then just, you know, sitting down and talking, having that open dialogue, and finding a way to solve both parties' needs without unduly harming anyone. You know, and it can be interesting. It can definitely get interesting, but that is more the modern labor movement than, you know, the days of old.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and like I said, I think we're moving in the right direction.
So I spent some time this morning talking about a bunch of things that I wanted to talk about, and I always like to give an opportunity to my guests just to speak on anything that I might have missed, something that you think that's important for people to know. So, you know, anything that's on your mind.
Anything. Ooh. Do I have to give you 5 cents?
Everything, yeah.
No, I one of the things, as I mentioned before, I think, unfortunately, community colleges are not looked upon in the light that I think they should be. Obviously, I'm not exactly objective.
Right.
But I know personally, I graduated from Suffolk Community College back in 1971 when we had one campus.
Right.
And I really believe that if it wasn't for that opportunity for me, I wouldn't be where I am today.
Sure.
And I think what we try and instill in students is that education is the key.
Yeah.
And when you get students that are in poverty, or like I said, no one in their family has gone to college, and you see them,
Right.
see it when the light bulb goes off, and they go, "This is what this is about."
Right.
I think it's something that people really need to see.
Sure. And that, you know, higher education and the labor movement, I think, go hand in hand in helping forge that path to the middle class, to do something more with yourself than the opportunities already afforded you. You know, you can go further. Definitely a point well taken in terms of, you know, people viewing maybe community colleges in a different way. And I certainly agree with your assessment, but I also have a vested interest. So, you know, for clarity. Again, I wanna just thank you for all that you do on behalf of your members, on behalf of all the people in Long Island Federation of Labor, sitting under that umbrella, on the state level, the national level. I mean, you've really dedicated your life to finding ways to help people that don't have a voice on their own, but collectively they do through someone like yourself and like-minded people that you work with. And additionally, I want to thank you for jumping on board with us for this May Day festival and collectively opening the doors to the labor world. So
Oh, brother, I want to thank you as well. I certainly appreciate what you do and what you do for your members.
absolutely. Thanks again. So my guest this morning again was Kevin Peterman from the Suffolk Community College Faculty Association, and join us again next week.